Welcome back to ClickFunnels Quick Start Blueprint. This is Dan Havey with CF Ninja Hacks, and in this video we are going to finish up talking about the sections, rows, and columns. So let's just come in here and we're going to manage this top section. And what we're going to do is we haven't talked about the advanced animation settings yet, and we have not talked about anything down here at the bottom. So let's come up here to advanced and animation, and what we're going to do is we're going to say time delay. So we want to fade in or fade in with scale. So what we're doing here is we're going to create an animation, but we're going to create it after a certain amount of time once the page loads. So in this case here, let's just say we're going to do this after 5 seconds after the page loads, and then we're going to have it fade in or fade in with scale. Well, fade in with scale means that not only does it fade in, but it gets kind of big first, and then it goes back to its normal size. Let's do this here. We're going to fade in with scroll, with scale. So let's start with this here, and I'm going to click out of here, and we're going to save this, and then we will reload the page. And so here we go. Now, when we first start off, that's not there, and then after 5 seconds, it should come flying in on scale. Well, it came in, but it did not seem to scale in. And I don't use these very much, so I apologize if I'm not quite getting everything right on this. It should be fade in with scale. So, all right, well, let's just try fade in this time. And let's click on save again. And let's reload this up again. So it's not there to begin with. It was what we want. And then 5 seconds later, yeah, it just kind of appeared. There was no scaling going on. So, all right, let's try something else. That's not what I wanted. Let's go out here to this section and to advanced and to animation. And so let's get rid of the time delay. Well, let's say in this case here on page load, we're going to have it fade in. You can have it scale in. You can have it move in from any direction. Let's do this. Let's have it move up from the bottom after 500 milliseconds, which is half a second. So actually, let's make this after 3,000 milliseconds, which would be 3 seconds. And so let's save this. And now, generally speaking, I don't do this with sections, and maybe that's why I'm having some issue here, because so now we have a blank space, and then boom, it just slid up from the bottom. So let's reload the page again. So we start off with a blank space at the top, and then it slid up into position. And so let's go back into our section. So like I said, I normally don't do this with sections. I'll do this with elements or maybe even a row, but especially elements. So that's why this is being kind of a little clunky. So let's just try this one here. Let's try the fade in after a little bit of time, and then after that we'll move on, because you get pretty much the idea of what it's going to look like. And so now there we go, we faded in. And oh, just real quickly, let's just see if we can get a fade in with scale on page load. And then of course you can also do it on page scroll, not just on page load. So let's do page load again, and then we will do scale in after 3 seconds. And we will save this. We will reload the page. And then there we go. See what it got a little bit bigger, and then it got smaller. And so that's kind of a good effect to really kind of catch somebody's attention. But now let's do the exact same thing. Let's come down here to this element. And so now this is a row that we're working in, and we'll have the exact same thing. So let's just say here on page load, we're going to do our scale in again, and we will do this here after 1 second, just so we don't have to wait too long. So let's save it. Let's make sure it gets saved. I don't think it did. So now let's do it here. So now the blue should not be here, and then boom, did you see it? It popped in like that, and now that one was still set. So that's a nice effect, but I'd probably stay away from doing it with sections. I'd probably do it with rows or elements rather than the sections itself. And then let's see here. So we finished up with our animations, and all of the elements, the rows, the sections, I'm not sure about the columns, but the elements, they all have this same ability right here. So now let's see here. Where are we? Let's just go to this section right here. And we're going to say that this section, we only want this section on mobile. So we're going to click on this, and what it does is it flips us over into the mobile view. And what it should do, because I set it here, see now we're going to get the red mobile only. So we know that this will only show up on mobile. And if we come over and we go back to desktop, now that section is gone. But we can come up to manage our sections up here, and you're going to see it's got the hide thing there. The eyeball is grayed out, and the reason why is that we are in the desktop view, and that should only be visible in the mobile view. But we can come back in and we can say, instead of desktop, or instead of mobile only, we can say now desktop only. And when we do that, then it will have the desktop only right here, and it has a red line around it. And is this one up here at the top, is that one really desktop only? No, it's not. It should be all. So I'm not really sure. This is the red desktop only showing up there for some reason, and it shouldn't be. So therefore so that section is set as desktop only. Let's put it back to all. And of course, as we saw before, we can hide elements, and we can undo the hide. Oops. Right here, and we can undo the hide and have it come back. So now let's come back in. So we got really one last thing to look at here, and that is coming down and clicking on this hashtag, and it says get CSS info. And so one thing you're going to see a lot of times is people say, okay, come in here and get your CSS ID selector. So as we discussed earlier, CSS is cascading style sheets, which tells the HTML elements what to look like. Well, in order to tell it what to look like, we have to identify it somehow, and we do that through what are known as selectors. There are 3 different types of selectors. You can have an ID selector, a class selector, or an attribute selector. Well, what ClickFunnels does is it gives you automatically here what is the ID selector for every single element. So let's go into a page, and let's just say this demo image right here. We're going to right-click on this, and we're going to inspect it. And right here, let's find the outer part of this element. You're going to see right here is its ID. So it's TMP image and a whole bunch of strings of numbers afterwards. So if we come into this image on our page, and we come to the gear, and we come down to the hashtag, you're going to see the exact same thing right there. So it tells the code what this element is. So now we can say, let's say we want to grab a hold of this, and we will copy this, and we'll go into our CSS. So we can go into our CSS, and again, this is not a lesson on CSS, but I'm showing you here what it can be used for. Is now we got our temp image here. We're going to put in a couple of curly brackets, and let's just say we want to put a box shadow around here. So let's just put a border around the outside. That's simplest. So we're going to say border colon, and let's just say 5 pixels solid. Oops, should be PX, not PS. Pixels solid black with a semicolon at the end. And I'll tell you, you have to have every single character right. Whenever you're dealing with CSS or JavaScript or anything like that, you got to make sure you get everything right. And if you see in the background, you can see right here, you can see as I put in the color, it's going to be around it. So let's change this here. Let's make it red just to make it stand out really good. And now we will close this. And now we have that around there just simply by grabbing a hold of that CSS ID selector, applying a little bit of CSS to it, and then we get the result that we want. So the other thing we can do with this, though, is, so let's just stick with this same element, is we can go in there, click on the gear again, come down to the hashtag, and this up here is known as your data title, data-title. So in this case here, let's say I want this to be my logo for the page. Now the way I normally name things is I leave what the element is. So if I'm giving a data title to a section, I will call it the something section or the something row if it's a row. In this case here, it's an image. So I want to capitalize the I for image, because always second, third, fourth words, you want to capitalize the first letter, but the first word, you don't want to capitalize that. So let's just say we're going to call this header image. So this is going to be our header image. It's going to have the data title of header image now. And let me just copy this out of here, and I will click on update. And now we're going to reload the page, because we don't reload the page, we're not going to see the changes we made. And now we have our new data title, and let me just highlight this section right here. And now we have the data title of header image. Okay, so we're going to click on here, and we're going to copy this. And we're going to go, and you don't have to do it this way, but I just made it real simple on myself. So let's come into our custom CSS, and let's make a new line of code. We need to put in square brackets, and inside of here we just say, oop, actually I can just paste in what I had right there. Let me paste that in. And in this case here, because we're in CSS, we only need single quotes. If you put in the double quotes, that's okay, because the editor will actually strip them out and put in single quotes. And then also, generally speaking, we want to put in an asterisk here, because we want to say if this data title includes, or contains more accurately, if the data title contains header image, then we want to do something. And in this case here, we are going to actually just, let's strip this off. Let's X that out, and you see the red went away from behind here, and now we will paste that in, and nothing worked, and that's because I need to get this out of here, because that's causing a syntax error. And now you will see that we got the red all the way around here again, just simply by putting in that little line of CSS code and targeting the data title this time instead of the CSS ID selector. So let me see if there was anything else, because let me check the rows here, because everything should be the same as far as the animation goes. That should all be the same for all the different elements, and the same thing with all the stuff at the bottom. Let me just check the columns. And yeah, I wasn't even sure if there was animation on the columns, but I guess you could have just a column come popping in. And of course, you have all the same settings down here, including the data titles and everything else. So that is it for right now. In the next videos, a whole bunch of videos, we are going to come in and we're going to start looking at each one of these elements. The way I will probably do it is by section. So we'll look at all the text elements first, then media, forms, etc. So as always, if you got any questions, just let me know.